Welcome to Take It from the Iron Woman. My name is Susanne Müller, your host and the Iron Woman. This podcast is about empowering yourself and others to make real changes in the world. You will hear from everyday, smart, sophisticated, hip people like you and me. Not everybody has to be an Iron Woman to impress the world. Together, we will learn from the sports and business leaders how you can become a more successful person as an entrepreneur or a leader. It's one step at a time, one day at a time. Take your steps now. Take your big steps now. Join me on this journey to success. Take it from the Iron Woman. We've spoken to Lauren before, an inspiring person. It's about adaptation, improvisation, traveling. So let's hear from her again. Tell us about your travels that you have done, and maybe how has the ballet or the dancing in general, how has that helped you while you were traveling?
I moved to Dublin, Ireland when I was pursuing my master's degree. I studied abroad for some time. I was there for over a year. During that time, I traveled to Norway. I was in Portugal for some time, Germany, Scotland. It was incredible. It was transformational for me, both as an artist and as an academic. During the course of my studies there, I was doing research for my thesis, for my master's thesis. But, I also had the opportunity to dance there and worked with refugees and asylum seekers. So that was an incredible opportunity, again, just to hear stories, hear different stories and get new perspectives from things that were contradictory to what I was seeing at the time in the media. Again, that was another deeper exploration of human interaction. There was no movement involved in that, but it was just hearing stories. So I worked with asylum seekers and refugees who were living in direct provision centers in Ireland. And the university that I was attending, Dublin City University, they were a university of sanctuary. It was fantastic for us to host these families, these individuals who were coming from different parts of the Middle East and Africa, and they had an opportunity to take classes. There was an opportunity for them to interact, of course, with the students at the university, and they shared their stories. It was one of the most incredible processes that I've undergone, being able to exchange stories and just listen. And for me as an artist, I thought of that sense of movement, but in the grand scale. So, quite literally as a refugee, you're being transported, you're moving from one country or one region to the next. It's not necessarily, of course, in the best light. It's not something that's willing all the time, but it's necessary. And it changes their lives. And so when I was having these conversations with these different families and students, I really thought about how inner peace is necessary, how you can present yourself as an eye into the rest of the world, how you can present yourself as a vehicle for hope. And I think of dance in the same way. When we go on YouTube or we watch a movie or something like that, we're expecting to be inspired, to be moved in some way. But I thought about these conversations and I was equally as moved. I didn't go into this having any expectations. I don't think that was the goal. I think it was just a means of just listening and sharing my time with these people. I walked away from that experience just completely speechless, to be honest, and educated in a sense where I don't think it would have happened in any other way. I was very grateful for those conversations. And I was moved quite literally to thinking in a new perspective about how we view those populations that are forced away from their homes and are seeking out educational opportunities or new beginnings. And the same thing, I found parallels between performing and being an artist and constantly seeking out new spaces, new forms of exploration. Of course, one is a bit more positive than the other, but I had the opportunity to sort of present that sense of hope. And they equally gave me a sense of hope where it's like, you can always start over, Suzanne. And I think that since that time, I've always reminded myself, you can always start over. You can begin again and again and again, regardless of your circumstances, regarding your environment or your position in life. And I think that they gave me that sense of hope. And as a performer, you give audiences that sense of hope. You inspire others in different ways.
Wow, this is so powerful, right? So giving hope. And I always say moving is moving. And especially the people, the refugees and the asylum seekers, when I look at those pictures, they take maybe one bag if with them. They come with nothing and they have to start a new life. I mean, I came to the US from Switzerland as an expat, and that's the glorious way of moving. And you as a student going to Ireland, but still you need to adapt. You need to adapt to a new culture. And that's not always so easy to adapt to a new way. And especially the refugees, it's even much harder for them.
Yeah, but again, a warm, friendly face and just being open-minded really help the situations. But you're absolutely right. You mentioned adaptation, and I think that's another skill so there's improvisation, and we talked about adaptation and being able to take that with you everywhere. Yes, sometimes they always tell you if your building's on fire, if your house is on fire, you shouldn't take anything.
No.
But they always ask if you were stuck somewhere and you could take one thing with you, what would it be? And that's a hard question to answer. It's very difficult because you can't really, we're very much used to our material possessions, to the things that we think we really need. And I think that's another thing that the pandemic has also sort of brought to light and helped us to think about is what are some of the things that we cannot live without. And one of the things that I think about lately is conversation and human interaction. I think that's one thing that we're all sort of missing now and learning to adapt to our new lifestyles. Having virtual conversations now is more common. It's becoming more of our reality. But one of the things that I hope to always take with me is that sense of human connection and never losing that, and that genuine sense of caring and wanting to connect. But now we're finding new ways to do that. So adapting to that is very important.
I just spoke to a friend of mine and we said we need to change. We cannot go back to the old days. These are gone. We have to adapt into the virtual world. And I also think in a way, you and we're connected. We've never met in person. Thank you so much. You featured me on your OVID organization. It's a new way of communicating and bringing people together. So it can also have some positive aspects, I think.
It can. There are some positive moments that have come out of this. And we were so happy to have you featured on our OVID platforms as well. It's exciting to always connect with influential women. So thank you for that. It's important. Like you're saying, there are positive strengths that are coming out of this. And I think that you can still invest in your hobbies, invest in your passions, regardless of the fact that you might not be able to go to the actual physical location. One of the things that I'm working through now is I've had the opportunity to teach virtual dance classes to young students, participate in dance classes. In DC, there's some fantastic studios that are still offering virtual classes. So being able to practice my technique in my own space is something that I'm grateful that I'm still able to do. We can grow from this and we can learn to adapt. We can just learn to constantly be okay with change. And looking back at working with some of my choreographers in the past, it could be 2 days before a performance, before a premiere of a new work. And we would be sitting in rehearsal. And I remember sometimes the choreography would change, even if it's one count of 8, and you'd have to be okay with it. You can really say no in that sense. And we became used to that. The choreography could change over and over and over. At first, it may feel frustrating, but you just relearn it. And you adapt and you move differently. You may be placed on upstage or downstage, or you may have to partner with someone new, or someone gets injured and you have to step in or learn a whole section of the choreography. And this could happen again either a week before a performance or an hour before a performance. And you learn to adapt. And it's something that is applicable to any field. Again, same thing, whether you're working in humanitarian efforts, whether you're working in office or whatever it is you're doing, to just be okay with change. And it's quite tricky. It sounds easy, but being okay, being comfortable with constant change is something that, I think we all are learning to master collectively, individually.
I think it's also the most adaptable people who can get through changes. And sometimes it's not the book smart people who flip into a book and say, hey, can we go to page 115? No. We need to adapt at the spur of the moment, as you said, when you are rehearsing. There's 2 more things that just came to my mind. So when you are rehearsing within a group, you always have new people, right? That's another way of adapting and changing all the time. And I think that's also something we can take into the leadership positions or in the workplace. We have to adapt all the time. We might have to work with different people. Not everybody thinks the same way. So that's another way of adapting. And I'm wondering, are you putting together a solo show or something exciting during the pandemic, or what can we expect from you?
At the beginning of the pandemic, during the actual lockdown in DC, at the DMV area, we were restricted in a greater sense for about 4 months. And we quite literally, of course, could not go out except for the grocery store, and we had a curfew. Yeah. I was within my 4 walls, and, I was used to my space day after day after day. And I did at that time create a piece that focused on being boxed in. I was working at that time. I actually moved as well. I was moving. I had all these. I moved during the pandemic. So I had all of these empty boxes. I remember I hadn't decorated or filled my living room just yet. And I had this ginormous box, this cardboard box. And I was sitting in my living room. It was after work. And I said, you know what? I felt drawn to that moment to create something, to start creating. Oh, cool. I worked with this prop, and I was working with the idea of being boxed in, manipulating that box and being inside, being external, whether it's I have to constantly be touching it because I'm bound to this object, I'm bound to this space. When I was creating that solo piece, I thought of the fact that we're all bound to 4 walls, or dealing with, whether we're in a relationship or with our families, we're seeing these people day after day after day. And we're, for the most part, cut off from meeting new people, at least physically, for the safety of ourselves and others. It was interesting for me, and I worked with different pieces of music. I'm a huge fan of Max Richter. He's composed some really elegant scores. Hans Zimmer has a few, and Philip Glass, I enjoy his piano scores. I was working with fast-paced tempos and what it was like working with slower paced music, but I found that it paired nicely the choreography with faster music, faster scores, because while we may be slowed down in that sense, our minds are racing. Well, when are we going to be out of this? When are we going to be able to see someone? When are we going to be able to go on a plane? And so these thoughts are constantly racing. And there are a lot of people that are dealing with mental health challenges during this time. And that creates a sense of chaos mentally. So more often than not, pairing it with a faster paced tempo, faster pieces seemed appropriate. I was working on that, but looking ahead, I'm interested in movement that integrates other people. Once it's safe again and we can work in studios here in this area, looking at how I can present that on stage, and working with a small group of dancers, and how really displaying, distance and space between them, but still having that sense of strong connection between the dancers can be emitted. I'm still working on that, and it's something that I'm excited about. I'm grateful for that, the source of inspiration, but more so looking forward to when it's safe again to work studio space.
Wow, I wish you good luck. And I think that boxed in is huge. You can put it in the context of the pandemic, but you can also be boxed in, or you can box in yourself, or this is huge. Ooh, I can't wait to see that piece. When is it ready?
Thank you. Hopefully soon. Hopefully we're looking forward to a much improved year. We're getting there. I think we're all getting there step by step. Artists and everyone collectively, we're doing what is necessary, and we're learning to adapt and be okay with change. So I think it's going to happen for the best. I think
so. Yeah, we have to be optimistic. It sounds like you're very optimistic. And I know when you said there's a lot of people with anxiety, people said you're so optimistic. Well, if you're not optimistic, then what?
Exactly. It's almost as if there's no other option. You have to keep moving. Who was it? It was Winston Churchill said, if you're going through hell, you keep going. And it sounds quite cliche, but you have to keep going. I mentioned it earlier, Suzanne, and it's true. There's some days I know that I hear from family members and friends, and just in passing conversations, where it's like, it's very hard for people to even get up these days and to keep doing their daily routines. But if you keep going, I can almost promise you that things will start to change. It may not be a tremendous change. It's minuscule. It all makes sense. And it's the same way with choreography. There's not just one big leap across the stage and then the curtain closes and everyone claps. it's small movements. It's an integration. It's a timeline of different movements, and people exit and people enter stage. And sometimes you're alone on stage and sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're not on stage at all. So when I think about it like that, and I think sometimes you have to be behind the scenes. Sometimes you have to be behind the curtain and you have to be watching. You have to be the bystander. You have to be the audience member, and you have to look at what's going on. And sometimes you're going to be called to stage and you're going to be called to perform, and you're going to be ready. You may not think you are, but when you're tossed in the moment, when you're thrown on stage, or if you're an understudy in dance, sometimes you're an understudy, you have to step in, you're going to be ready. You'll shock yourself. And when it comes time when we're going to be quote unquote reintroduced into our society, I think we're going to be ready. I think it's going to be scary at first. We'll surprise ourselves. I'm sure of it. I'll just mention this one piece. I was in this piece that was choreographed by a dancer who worked with Ohad Naharin in his company Batsheva in Israel. And she had set a work on us. And it was the first piece that I felt very awkward when I was learning the choreography, because there's certain movements that are not alarming, but slightly more, whether it's provocative or just sort of awkward within your body. For the first, I'd say 10 or 15 minutes of the piece, there's no music. And then the music starts to slowly build. It's soft and then it gets louder and louder and louder. The choreography itself is minimal, and then it grows and it gets more exaggerated as the music builds. I remember learning it in class in the studio, and I was uncomfortable with doing some of the movement. And then the choreographer came up to me. She said, well, just do it. You're not doing things for movement's sake. You're doing it quite intentionally, even though it seems simple, even though it seems uncomfortable. I was forced to, again, dig deep and take a look at it and step outside of my comfort zone. If you're feeling awkward, if you're placed in an awkward moment, just accept it. And it's going to pass. It doesn't last forever.
No.
And you learn something new about yourself. And I think that's part of the enjoyment of life, even now, is when you're learning something new about yourself. I try to look back on every week or even every day and say, well, hey, what's something new that I learned about myself? What's something new I learned about my life or the world around me? And if I can look back and find something, I'm grateful for that day, or I'm grateful for that circumstance, whether it was awkward or not. It makes life interesting.
So much fun, right? So don't take yourself so serious. Adapt. It's about improvisation. Be in the moment. Thank you so much, Lauren. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Suzanne. I appreciate it.
Take it from the Iron Woman. We have episodes every Monday, every Wednesday. Don't miss out. Coaching is also available. Now is the time. Book a date with me. Take care of yourself. If not now, then when? Thank you so much. Subscribe. See you next time. Bye-bye.